Hey there, everybody. It's Mike Yao with Savage Kingdoms role-playing game and A Fire in the Head Productions. Haven't done a video in quite a while, so I thought I would do another one. And today, this is Valentine's Day, by the way, when I'm recording this, so that's why I'm wearing my red and that sort of thing. And also, here's the Savage East, which is also themed red. That's right. There you go. Get yours at Drive-Thru RPG or at Wyvern's Tail if you live in the Western North Carolina area, Asheville. Be great if I could get further distribution, but I just can't quite afford it to get it out to regional bookstores or even national. That'd be amazing. But anyway, so speaking of the Savage East, and not necessarily Valentine's Day, I just wanted to comment. That's when I'm doing this thing, and I'm wearing red and all that kind of stuff. Happy Valentine's Day to everyone. So I thought today I would do a series. So remember the last series I did the Savage Kingdoms of Astagonia. Astagonia being the European-esque kind of Western continent of the known world of the Savage Kingdoms role-playing game system. So the Savage East, of course, covers Hassan and Amanju, and also the polar continent of Ragnagard, and also the kind of equatorial isle continent of Mezca. So that series covered all of that. I was finally done with it, and I thought I would go ahead and start the Savage East series. See how far I get. Hopefully, I'll do the whole thing like last time. But again, I've gotten really busy with some acting stuff, which is great, and some other things as well. May or may not be working on another game system as well, or two, and so I've been pretty busy, but I actually had a few hours today after my wife and I went out for Valentine's Day lunch and that sort of thing, and now she's kind of off doing her thing, and I'm got a couple hours to kind of, for once, not too much going on. Yeah, I could be writing and stuff like that, but I'm not. I'm going to do this video. So we're in the Savage East, and let's get started. So the first, and these are the human cultures, by the way. I'll start with those because those of you who know Savage Kingdoms relatively well, you know that the human cultures are really the base races. The non-humans are actually optional. They're not really, I guess, officially part of the rules, but you do what you want. So when I laid out the books, I just kind of want to let people know that was really kind of optional if you want really more of a historical fantasy feel or even a sword and sorcery feel, which has a lot of ring of historical fantasy, particularly the antiquated ages, the classical era, dark ages, and that sort of thing. Those types of genres of fantasy are very human driven. It's more about the different cultures of mankind, these cool kingdoms and tribes that rise up and they face the darkness of some of the other races. Some of the races don't necessarily have to be evil, non-human, but they're very mysterious, and the mysterious back in the days of pulp, sword and sorcery fiction were often related to possibly evil, or at least weird and unusual, and that's how the big sword and sorcery characters like Conan and sort of dealt with them. But they weren't all, he also learned as he grew older and wiser that they weren't necessarily evil. They might have been misunderstood, and some of them might have actually been good in some, like in the sense of the elephant creature in the Tower of the Elephant story. And again, I'm talking about Conan. That was a very deep alien race. He kind of assumed it was, well, he was just there for treasure. He was like a young 16, 17-year-old adventurer. Didn't really know any better. And then he encountered this creature that he thought was some demonic thing, and it really was just kind of, it might have been even more angelic. It was basically I guess in D&D terms, it would be like an aberration. So yeah, anyway, it was a deeper creature, and it was kind of misunderstood, and it was the last of its race and all that kind of stuff. So those are kind of the themes of sword and sorcery and historical fantasy, and that's a long way of going to explaining why the human races and cultures are really the core races in the Savage Kingdoms 3rd edition role-playing game and the previous editions, and that the non-human races are actually optional. There you go. So those of you who prefer more of a semi-high fantasy sort of Savage Kingdoms is not written to be high fantasy per se, but you can make it so by making the Alunashi or the Duergar or the Jan or the Kajula or whatever some of the other non-human races more common. You would still have low to medium magic as it should be in SK anyway. But yeah, you could still make it kind of high fantasy-ish by making those non-human races, playable non-human races, more common. All right, so anyway, the first human culture for this video, it's at 5 minutes and I'm really now just getting started, is right there. So that is our Aryan or Aran. So as you can see right there, they're based on ancient Egypt. So, and just to clarify right there, so the reason they're Aryans or Arans, so in the past when you spell Aryan, and that was some people occasionally would confuse it with Aryan, and Aryan of course is a real world thing, and in today's age it's not even doesn't sit well with a lot of people. So I just want to kind of clarify that it's that they are Aryan, they're from Ar, right? But if you find the Aryan thing being too close to Aryan or whatever, you could call them Aryans. And they, and as part of the lore, they kind of go by whatever. Most Aryans or Aryan people are very, very chill. I use a modern word. So they don't really care. They're rarely going to be insulted by not calling them exactly what they wish to be. So, all right, here's a few paragraphs of, actually there's more, I wrote more about the Savage East cultures than some of the Western ones. I'm not sure why. Maybe I think I edited more of the core rule book down a little bit so I didn't make it so huge. That was a big concern, and that might have been why it didn't have as much description. So maybe I won't read all of this. I'll just read some of it. The people of Ar come from an ancient line of people, men and women, once serving as mere provincial citizens to the great kingdom of Zarcon. Yet Ar thrived and grew, and soon its priest kings could no longer abide the moral corruption of its parent realm, for Zarcon was ruled by powerful sorcerers known as the Witch Lords, and eventually rebelled against it. As a result, a mighty war erupted between the two realms, though after 5 years of bloodshed and strife, it says strive, so typo, Ar was victorious, though at great loss. The Witch Lords had been thrown down, and Zarkon became a foul and vapid wasteland, for such great magics were evoked, and in those days that blighted the land. So let's see, I'll go a little bit further. Ar would become ruled by three pharaohs. So basically, to summarize that last paragraph, Ar was a province of a greater kingdom called Zarkon, and it was the largest of the provinces. And in that province were three kind of cities that allied themselves together. And there was, the greater Zarkon, the Witch Lords, they weren't really too concerned because some of the Witch Lords ruled in that area anyway. But those three Witch Lords that ruled from those three cities kind of got together, and they realized some of the evil practices that Zarkon was doing. And Zarkon is based on kind of very ancient Egypt slash Mesopotamian. So if you're getting kind of an epic, almost biblical feel there, that's intentional. So eventually the Aryans realized that the greater Zarconians were worshiping demons, and they were even sacrificing children to these horrible creatures that they would make pacts with, and they were dabbling in the sorceries and alchemy, and they were kind of taking the cheat form of magic, which was traditionally called sorcery, and especially in the sense of a sword and sorcery setting. Sorcery almost always has a dark connotation. Not always, but very, very 90% of the time. Meaning, and in the Savage Kingdoms world, sorcery even has a deeper meaning, that it's not only kind of dark magic in general, or forbidden magic, but it's almost a cheat. It's like summoning demons and finding crappy components using blood and just any kind of way to get the attention of a dark power to make a pact with or to learn a spell from or something like that. Whereas, say, the Aluna She might be considered more, their magic is more pure because it's more blood. Not blood in the sense I just described, but it's more internal. It's more, to put a modern day spin on, more in their DNA. They're just kind of gifted with it. They, in fact, a lot of the She, and I mentioned this in past videos, the way Tolkien described it with the elves, they don't really consider it magic the way we think. It's just a natural extension of them. So anyway, some cool little stuff to keep in mind. All right, so anyway, the point of all that was the Aryans were kind of getting disgusted with some of the other six pyramidal cities that were part of Zarkon becoming corrupt and doing all these horrible practices, and their ethics were sliding really low. And if there's a Sodom and Gomorrah theme going in here, it's kind of on purpose. It's not exactly like that, but so Ar basically rebelled, and they were like, the three pharaohs in those cities were kind of secretly like, I think it's time we try to make a move and overthrow the rest of Zarkon and free ourselves and make, do some good stuff for our people, because we're all going to backslide into this horrible. And these were the earlier. This is one of the earliest realms of human civilization in the setting. Ebedezuk, which I will cover later on because I'm going in alphabetical order, I'll cover. They're technically probably slightly older than even R, but R and Zarkon are definitely right in the forefront of human civilization. So, in other words, as humans were beginning to civilize and evolve, they're now on the main stage, right? And the Alunashi that have already been around for thousands of years, and even the Dorgar are kind of watching humans and like, let's see what they do. And so if they're starting off with these failures of corruption and evil, not a good thing. So the Aryans were almost kind of like self-aware of that, and so they rebelled against it. There was this big war. Eventually, it would become known to historians as the Shadow War, because it kind of created the Shadow Sea, which is kind of nearby, which maybe I'll get to here in a second once I get done rambling. Uh, and the Shadow War lasted 5 years. And eventually, and it took 5 years for R to become victorious. I think it was 5 years. Yeah, I have it in my lore here somewhere. We'll go with that until I find otherwise. I think it was 5 years. So, also known as the War of Light and Shadow. So, but sometimes just kind of shortened to the Shadow War, the War of Light and Shadow. So, R was victorious, kind of barely. Like the whole land was blighted and destroyed. So now it's a cool adventuring area for people that are characters who really want to challenge. Because Zarkon is now this blighted wasteland, not only from all the greater magics that were more potent in that day, because the theme here in this setting, pretty similar to Middle Earth, is that, and others, that magic was greater back in, and it's kind of fading as people become a little more banal, or maybe even more civilized, or maybe even more technological. They've kind of forgotten maybe the deeper ways of true magic, and now they're kind of relying more on sorcery, like I mentioned earlier, alchemy. And alchemy can be kind of wishy-washy as well. So, but alchemy also represents a little bit. There's a bit of science to that as well, right? So, traditional magic is almost being replaced with shortcut magic or like scientific magic, like such as alchemy, which is kind of a mix of both actually. So, just some thematic stuff that I think is appropriate to R and by default Zarkon. So R would become ruled by three pharaohs, each one governing one of the three great pyramidal cities of the New Kingdom. The new Aryans, sometimes called Aryans, admired goodness and light much more than their forebears, though they descended from the same bloodline and racial stock. As such, the people of R, much like Zarconian ancestors, appear as human folk with bronze-hued skin tones, dark hair, and dark or, more rarely, amber-colored eyes. Few bloodlines are pure after 2,200 years, though the rare family, usually of noble birth, might be able to trace its lineage all the way back to the time of the witch lords, a practice most would do only in secret. That's how you can start with the Zarconian blood talent. Aryans resemble the ancient Egyptians. I think this is already kind of apparent, but I'll read it anyway. Aryans resemble the ancient Egyptians of real world history, and they hold Arius, a god of light and enlightenment, as their patron deity in all reaches of the kingdom. Other deities worth mentioning, however, are Akhmenon, god of the sea and greater moon, and Tathras, goddess of writing and the stars. Less mentionable is Zur. Zur is an ancient serpent god of darkness and forbidden lore, the patron deity of ancient Zarkon, uh, a divinity that some claim is directly related to Slur, the chief god of the Sleer. So yeah, fun little thing there. So yeah, Zur was kind of like this, believed to be this mighty serpent that encircled the world, and the two moons were his eyes, and not to be too gross, but the red sun was his anus. So, and some people believe, and I've never made it clear in the lore. I may not even have the real answer myself. I kind of leave it open to you guys, individual game masters who run this thing. I guess if you want to message me to let me know. I'll tell you secretly what I've officially made it as canon. But honestly, a lot of this stuff, and even in my own setting, I leave it open. I think it's much more fun that way instead of like, oh, here's the real thing. Because really, to make it less meta and more in character and more in world, nobody would really I mean, 2,200 years ago, there might be a few tablets of this stuff recorded. But even then, as we know in our real world, history is written by the victors, and sometimes it can be slanted. So yeah, so who knows? So I prefer that kind of being open. But yeah, so Zarkon's patron deity was Zur, an ancient servant god of darkness and forbidden lore, and they think that might have come from Slur, which is about the closest way humans can pronounce the Slyrian pronunciation of Zur or Slur. So yeah, all right. Allowable callings for Aryans: alchemist, assassin, bard, craftsman, cultist, healer, merchant, which is rare, but it's on there on the list. Priest, sage, seer, soldier, sorcerer, vizier. So there you go. So that's about what, a dozen, 13 or so. Attribute array: Aryan player characters must arrange their attributes at character creation using the following guidelines. And right here, I'm on page 7, by the way, if you own the Savage East companion book to the core rule book. It's right there. Yeah, bottom of page 7. So, like I did in the past with the Western stuff, I'll just say what their three primary attributes are. The three attributes that their culture is best known for. And that's intellect, magnetism, and willpower. So the bottom three, the more mental, spiritual ones. The physical ones are, just kind of average. So, meaning they could start with as high as a +4 intellect, +4 magnetism, +4 willpower, and they can eventually max out with +6 in those. And they can start with as low as a -2. They can't start with any lower than those because would not really be part of their culture. Uh, Special abilities: they have a special or racial ability known as pyramidal cities. Aryans are more used to stone temples and paved streets. Therefore, Aryan characters gain a +1 bonus to perception, persuasion, and resolve rolls while within cities with populations of no less than 10,000 inhabitants. So, in other words, in larger cities. For our purposes, and this is kind of true and sort of roughly in medieval lore, a city was usually considered some 10,000 inhabitants or more. A town is like 1,000 to 10,000, and that's kind of what I abide by in most parts of this setting. And then if you were below 1,000, that was a village. And if you really want to get detail, a hamlet or even a thorp might be less than 100, or just a glorified farmstead or manor. So anyway, their second racial or special ability is called Sun Touched. They gain a +1 bonus to endurance rolls to resist heat and fire effects. Aryans, after all, are a sun-soaked southern people. And I mentioned earlier, kind of bronze skin and darker haired. So they're modeled sort of on ancient Egyptians of the real world. Skill specialties. Our NPCs may begin with 3 skill. This is like any other human culture. 3 free skill specialties of character creation, which must be selected from below. So without reading them all, I'll just kind of skip. Actually, we'll read them all. There's not that many. So they can start with oils or powders, a specialty of alchemy. In crafting, they can start with architecture, engineering, or magical objects as a specialty. They're good builders. They're good pyramid builders in general, but overall pretty good architects as well. Or they could choose herbalism, black lotus, healing herbs, or purple lotus as a specialty of herbalism. They could choose deciphering or writing, a specialty of language. They could choose arcane, history, or religion, a specialty of lore. One of their choices could also be detecting magic or any known spell within magical arts life. Same with magical arts water, detecting magic or any known spell within that discipline. So life or water magic. Performance ritual. Very ritualistic, ceremonial people in general. Persuasion, diplomacy. They can choose diplomacy as a specialty of persuasion to start with for free. They can choose concentration or resist corruption as a resolve specialty of the resolve skill. And lastly, but not leastly, they could choose dagger, khopesh, scimitar, spear, or staff as a melee weaponry specialty. Cool. All right. Favorite talents. I won't read all of those. So, they're most. So there's 6 categories of talents, as you may know, in SK3, or all of us. I think in previous editions do. Mystical. So Aryans have the most accessibility to mystical talents, as might be imagined. But actually, a fair amount of battle talents, maybe more than you might think. Pretty good bit of social talents, which I guess kind of makes sense as well. There are only 2 blood talents that are considered favored. And remember, a favored talent means you pay 1 point less for it. Um, so meaning that it is easier to learn. That's why it's called favored. Their favored blood talents are angelic blood and sleer blooded. And angelic blood is more of a wanted thing. Again, rare, but that would be really cool for them. Slayer blooded is more of a sneaky thing that kind of got in there, and sometimes it was traced back to Zarconian bloodlines. The Sleer did have some clashes and historical influences of R and Zarkon. I touched on that a little bit earlier when I mentioned Slur, but to make it to kind of bring it out a little bit more right there. Let's see. Mystical talent, like I said, they have a lot of mystical talents. Just a few of them would be like celestial magic, dabbling arcanist, evil eye, far-reaching magic, grimoire, which in this case has to be a scroll or a tablet and not an actual book. Power of silence, priest of Arius, sanctum magic, words of power, meditative trance, etc., etc. Then social talents are anywhere from apprentice to artisan to mentor, physician, sage, scribe, street rat. Subterfuge talents. Their only favorite ones for subterfuge is lampoon, seductive dance. I said that weird. Tomb robber, and then other talents, which is kind of your miscellaneous category. Elite affiliation, the white magi, also known as the Toth magi, and that just basically means white magician or white wizard, and an Aran or Aryan. Healer's touch, keen memory, Lotus Master, Pious Faith, Puzzle Master, and Tireless. So there you go. Favorite weaknesses. This means you gain an extra point if you check one of these weaknesses because they're, indicative of your race or culture. Addiction to purple lotus, which is kind of a dream. Well, dream lotus is technically pink, but purple lotus also puts you in a deep, relaxed state. And a lot of magicians, a lot of sorcerers like to use purple lotus, even though they risk addiction to it, because it allows you to gain your stamina back much quicker, and you can even have bonus stamina with it. Sadly, I don't see it used in games that much. I've seen a couple sorcerers and PC sorcerers do it, but I don't know. I need to figure something out. I can't seem to get a lot of players to really connect to some of the cool herbalism, alchemy stuff that's in this setting. But you try. Let's see. Healer's Touch, Keen Memory, Lotus Master, Pious Faith, Puzzle Master, and Tireless. Yeah, I think I said all those. All right. Yeah, I was on weaknesses. So addiction to Purple Lotus, Oathbound, and it can be Oathbound to anything. I didn't specify it. Obsession of knowledge. So obsessed with knowledge. Phobia of black magic, darkness, or sleer. And waif. Waif is very thin, and they can be a little wafy at times. To go back to the phobia thing, so black magic, phobia of black sorcery, which kind of makes sense. Phobia of Sleer due to the Sleerian influence of the past, which was often negative. Although the Sleer did introduce, whether they meant to or not, a lot of architectural and alchemy, and so they did in some ways indirectly teach humans a lot of pretty advanced stuff. Whether they meant to or not. And then fear of darkness. That's kind of interesting because people think, wow, what a 5-year-old to be fear of the dark. But the Aryans have a really good reason for that. It's a deeper meaning. So Zarkon represented darkness. They even worshipped a lot in the dark. Um, without cutting it too light and dark. So the Aryans, and also their main patron deity, the chief deity of all of R, is Arius, who is a god of light and the sun and enlightenment as well. So they really embrace light, being in the open, and warmth and truth. All that stuff kind of goes along with that, and very suspicious of dark. So really, they're more suspicious of the dark, most Aryans, but this one allows you to be a little bit like you're literally or just don't do well. You just have kind of a phobia of darkness, and that's a tough one to roleplay if you choose. So I would suggest just taking it as a minor instead of a major, because then it's only DL10 resolve roll to resist going out into the dark. Otherwise, it's a 20. Yeah, so that's a tough one. Otherwise, it's DL20 if it's a major phobia. Let's see. Starting languages. Aryan is your native language, which uses a hieroglyphic style writing system. So yeah, just like the ancient Egyptians, they have a hieroglyphic writing system, very symbolic, very hieroglyphs. You also speak one of the following if your intellect is -1 or better: Azarian, Zaramese, Zunti, Old Zarconian, Jan, which is Djann, so basically a kind of a mortal version of the genie kind in SK setting, and Chinari, which of course are the lion people. So Old Zarconian, just to go back a little bit, our Zarconian is really kind of cool. So I did any language that has old in front of it. Generally means it's an out of fashion language, like it's not really spoken anymore. It's mostly a lore language or maybe a religious language, kind of like Latin in the real world, or even ancient Greek or Aramaic, even if you want to go even deeper back. So something like that. So Old Zarconian is not something people. I mean, you can speak it, but nobody hardly knows it. So it's more of a written lore language. A lot of old spells, particularly death magic spells, and maybe some shadow magic spells, would be written in Old Zarconian. So, sample names. All right, some sample names for our end: Tathra, Amenhotep, Seti, Akhmet, Tathopra, or Tathkopra, are Amun, and Heptureth. And I could break some of those down. So some of obviously the sounds I took for ancient Egyptians, and some of the meanings are from ancient Egyptian, but I also created bits of my own language with the Aryans. Toth is light. So Tothra is also light. Or no, Toth is white. Sorry, Ra, I just use light, just like Asia. So that would mean white light. Amun or Amun Tep and you could spell Amun or Amun. I think it means the same thing. Tep, I think I made was sister of, but then I changed it. I don't know. Doesn't really matter. Seti is like an actual Egyptian name. Akhmet is very close to an actual Egyptian name, but sounds like it. Uh, Tathkopra, I definitely kind of made that one up. That's white, white sword of light, or something like that. Our Amun, I think I made Amun was sun, so light of the sun. Heptureth, and then I forgot what I mean. What was Hep? Anyway, I think it's warrior or mighty. Mighty, he of the mighty spear, something like that. So anyway, those are male sample names. Female sample names are Tepsura, Amun-Ankra, Sethras, Ankmetra, Tathras, and Amun-Ara. Oh wait, there's another one, and Heptura. Those are all female. And to kind of break those down, I think it was mighty sunlight, mighty sister of the sun, Amun-Ankra. So Ankra still means life, like in ancient Egypt. Amun, I think, is eye of light, Ra, eye of the light of light and light. So anyway, it's kind of fun to kind of break these. I mean, I'm a bit of a sort of a language fanatic, and I like to kind of see what the ancient meanings of words were. It just really appeals to me. Sethris, Tathris, Amun-Ara, and Heptura. So anyway, the point of sample names in the book, I think sometimes players take them literal. It's like, oh, I have to choose one of them. Like, no, it's on a fly. Also, if you need an NPC name, but it really is the deeper meaning of it. I think is to what my intent was that you know how the names sound. So instead of literally choosing one, although that's fine, you can mix and match. Instead of Tathra, maybe you're Hepthra, or Setera, or Akhmetra, or Toth Akhmet, or Tathamun. So a lot of them are kind of interchangeable, and they're really kind of you can make some cool sounding stuff there. Aryans do not use formal surnames even among the nobility, but instead utilize son of and daughter of identifiers or possibly place names, such as, and actually I say possibly place names that I really meant at most of the time place names. For example, Amenhotep of Tothkanen or Tepsura of Akhmet. Tothkanen is one of the three major cities in our pyramidal cities, and as is Akhmet. Tothkanen is probably they're all big cities and they're all equally important, but if you had to like say when it was the quote capital, would be Tothkanen. In fact, it's kind of more of the political mercantile capital, and Akhmet is a little more it's more of the religious capital. And then what was the other third one? You think I would know right off? Yeah, I'll come to it later. Anyway, it's more of the it's a little more sorcery and alchemy is resonates more there. Cultural items. Aryan characters may begin play with 1 or 2 by spending a point of luck of the following cultural items in addition to the more normal gear they might purchase. So this is a normal thing where you get to choose your cultural item. Right there. This is where I am. Page, whatever that is, 6. No, wait, 7. So, oh, there goes the page. Anyway, I'm right there. So, page 8, actually, in the Savage East. So, cultural items. I won't read them all, but here's a few that you could choose from. Actually, I will read them all. I keep saying that, right? I'm not going to do it, and I do it. Rusty Rankshit Kopesh. Crafting deal 20 crafting roll to restore to exceptional quality. So it's potentially exceptional quality. It was at one point, being the inference. Bronze Bejeweled Kopesh. Dried and preserved Black Lotus Blossom. These are all choices. Dried and preserved Black Lotus Blossom. Alchemical / magical healing elixir instantly restores 2 health points. 2 doses of that. Scarab Amulet, granting the wearer +1 to endurance rolls when resisting disease. Very cool. Staff made of stone wood. Stone was there's a forest called I think it's called the Wizard Wood. No, not very original. It's in kind of southwestern R. So R basically is it's definitely not square, but it's like roughly a rounded-ish square at the end of the peninsula with a little land bridge, which is where Zarcon is, or what's left of Zarcon, because a lot of it sank into the Shadow Sea, or the Sea of Shadow. And then at the very, if this is R and the peninsula's up here at the very southwestern area, I guess I could show you a map in a second. There's this forest that grows this very stone or iron-like wood. That the wood is so solid and so dense that it is often described as being like stone. So people just kind of loosely call it stonewood. So you can start with a staff made of stonewood. It does an extra point of maximum damage and has armor piercing 1 instead of 0 like a regular staff, and it's considered exceptional quality. Lapis and gold-plated necklace or bracelet is worth 10 plus 1d20 silver coins. Sacred symbol of Aureus, winged sun or white pyramid, grants +1 to magical arts, life, air life, or and shadow skill rolls when performing ritual spells. So only with rituals, but 3 different disciplines it covers of magic. Black inverted pyramid or coiling serpent necklace, which is a symbol of Zur, granting +1 to magical arts, earth, death, and shadow rolls when performing ritual spells. So kind of almost the opposite of that first one. And yeah, you may not want to be caught with that either. In most parts of R, particularly the big cities. Speaking of which, so I keep mentioning the 3 pyramidal cities. Most of the population of R lives in those. I'd say 80% of the whole population lives in these big cities. They're very city people, and they like to build these giant ziggurats or pyramids in the middle. And most of the city is in this massive pyramid, and there's other buildings around it. And then just outside of that, you might get a few little tiny villages of craftspeople or caravan encampments. And then other than that, it's pretty. There's a few small villages on like little trade routes between the 3 cities. Other than that, it's pretty much it because the middle of R is pretty desert-like. So, general code of honor for Aryans. Respect and obey the 3 pharaohs of Ar and all attending nobles and court officials. Respect and obey all priests, particularly those of Arius, unless they prove corrupt. Respect and obey all elders and wise folk. As keys to the past, they are doors to the future. Do not pursue the dark arts, for they lead to corruption and eventual downfall. That's the lesson of Zarkon. Seek always the path of knowledge, enlightenment, and higher civilization. Ignore all insults, for they are but idle chatter, and as water off an ibis's back. Uh, would be duck, right? But I wanted to be kind of Egyptian there. Show respect and hospitality to those deserving such honors, ignoring those undeserving. That's right. You tell them. So yeah, that's their kind of general code of honor that they like to live by. Again, not every single Aryan character would literally follow every single thing, but that's what you grew up with, and that probably would influence you. And so, as I've said before, general codes of honor, I think if PCs follow 2/3 to 3/4 of it, they're probably doing a pretty good role-playing job, unless their character is literally specified. They'll say, no, this guy doesn't, or girl doesn't want to really do any of that, or maybe only hits 1 or 2 of the points. Again, a code of honor is not supposed to be an alignment system. I'm not a big alignment fan. A lot of people probably agree. I respect it for the legacy that it is from Dungeons and Dragons. And I do run, and I mentioned this before, I do run professional games for kids. And I kind of use it a little there because it gives them a little more of a channel. Like, okay, this is, and yeah, they flip back and forth and stuff. We all know, but they're aware of it, and I think so it's kind of cool for them. And then with adults, I think it's better to have like a more gray system, like such as the SK system. There's obviously better ones out there in other games as well, but just a little side note about alignment, general code of honor, and that kind of stuff. That's it for the 35 minutes. That's it for the player character, the character creation part. Let me go very quickly because I I was going to try to do these videos a little bit shorter, but here we go. But real quickly, page 123 in the Savage East. It looks really pretty here. Um, Michael Scott Phillips did a good job with these maps. He bumped up his game for the maps in this book even more than the core rule book. In the core rule book, they look great, but these I think turn out even better. He applied some different um, methodologies here and popping some of these maps out. So anyway, what I was just showing you is a map of what I just described actually. So that is the sometimes known as the Zarconian or the Peninsula, and there's R at the end. And actually, in ancient times, the whole thing is known as the Azarian Peninsula. The original racial stock of the Zarconian and Aryan people, there was a tribe of people called the Zarians, which, and some people believe, it actually means people of the stars, weirdly enough. So there is actually a little bit of lore out there that the Aryans or Zarconians, these people might have come from a different world. But again, I leave that completely open. It's probably a long shot, but it's there for you to tease and toy with. Sea of Shadow, so Zarkon. So you can see Zarkon is, some people have asked, if Zarkon was so mighty, why is it such a narrow? It was much wider. So the Sea of Shadows swallowed a lot of it right there, as you can probably see on the map. So it was a good bit bigger. It was about 4 times larger, I think, back in its heyday. So after the big war, and there was also a cataclysmic event that happened that swallowed more of the land, and some people believe that, the Aryans believe that, yeah, the sinners of Zarkon, the black wizards of Zarkon and sorcerers were being punished. And there was even a time where most of the land bridge even disappeared underwater, and that was only 150 years ago. And then the sea has finally kind of rolled back, revealing Zarkon again. So Zarkon's even more nasty to go into because not only was it laid waste all these great sorcerers that are being used during back in the War of Light and Shadow, but when the sea swallowed a lot of it and then it's even more nasty right now. And one of the few places in the world that black lotus grows because it only grows in a kind of nasty, steamy swamp area. It almost seems to kind of thrive on brackish water as well. So that is a cool map. Some other things to hit on, maybe really quick. I went over some of the religion. The primary deity of R is unquestionably Arius, god of light, enlightenment, and eternal life. He is sometimes assumed to be quite literally the red sun and the 2 moons his offspring. Secondarily, there is the goddess Tathras, a deity of the stars, writing, and mathematics, as well as Akhmenen, a god associated with the sea, rain, and wind. There are other, even more minor deities, though most have fallen out of fashion, although the worship of Zur, the serpent god of darkness and forbidden knowledge, is strictly forbidden. There you go. Geography, I think I mentioned that. The the Stonewood Forest or the Wizardwood Forest. North City of the Tuthkanan, there's a expansive field of small pyramids, private tombs of nobles and others with enough renown and wealth to afford such a thing. Yeah, there's this massive field of like pyramid tombs just outside of Tuthkanan. Let's see. There's a pharaoh that rules each of the cities. None are necessarily greater than the end, but if they have to come together and make a decision where, like, if something happens where one clearly needs to be maybe in charge, it's usually the pharaoh king of Tathkanan. So let's see, the grand high priest of Arius typically becomes the pharaoh king of Akhmet. Like I said, that was the religious center. Consequently, the pharaoh of Cuthmes, that was the name of that third city I was trying to remember. Cuthmes has usually been either a great warrior or a devoted man of the sea, and even sometimes a priest of Akhmenen. Apart from these 3 large city-states, comprised mainly of massive stepped pyramids or ziggurats, the Aryans also have dozens of small towns in villages. Like I said earlier, dozens. Not to sound like dozens and dozens. It's almost like a dozen, maybe a little bit more, maybe 2 dozen. So yeah, most inland somewhat, yet only a few in the central desert region, which I think I kind of hinted at earlier. Oh yeah, there's a place called the White or Ivory Pyramid. Not so if it's out in the this little bay. I don't know if you saw it on the map. That's where the Tothmagi study. It's kind of like to put almost a more high fantasy spin on it. It's kind of a wizard's academy. The Tothmagi are probably the most powerful and also like academy of wizards or sorcerers because they're really kind of the same in the setting. I know D&D has they're very specifically different, but it's just different terminology. Um, Probably, possibly in the whole setting. The disciples of Xanthala could make pretty good argument. Maybe Circle of the Raven in the west, but yeah. And that's where they train. That's where they study in the Ivory Pyramid. And really, hardly anybody's allowed in there. Occasionally, they take students as young as 7 years old. Twice a year, their parents are allowed to visit for 2 days, or they can take 2 days leave, or 3 days, I think, to go see them. And that's about it. So it's pretty strict. That's how they turn out such great wizards because they are very dedicated to their studies. Let's see, flora and fauna. There's scorpions and jackals. There's a place called the Moonlight Sands, which is a smaller. You might find lamia out in which are horrible demonic kind of camel women type creatures. There's said to be a sphinx, a pretty famous one that dwells in the Moonlight Sands. Uh, yeah, and you might find purple lotus. Purple lotus actually grows in the desert. It actually thrives on the lack of water and like lots of sunlight. Um, Let's see, food and drink. Aryans enjoy light wine, scarcely fermented, which are a little more than fruit liqueurs. They also have a light form of beer, though not as popular as wine or the occasional import from faraway lands. Rice is often partaken in, although it generally only grows in well-engineered gardens or small fields. Fresh water is fairly scarce here. Along the coast, they eat fish, eel, and shark as common staple foods, and honey or cinnamon swordfish is considered a delicacy. Aryans will also typically eat crocodile meat, but will seldom, if ever, touch snake meat because snakes are associated with Zur or Slur, which is actually illegal. And it's actually illegal to eat in Tothconan and Akhmet. So in Cuthmes, it's not illegal, but it's kind of frowned on. Cooked scorpion meat is a semi-delicacy, and even lotus plant salads are not unheard of. I'm laughing, I forgot I put that in there. Breads are also somewhat common, though not to the degree of most other civilized cultures. Plums, dates, and figs are often enjoyed, as well as golden apples, on occasion also known as tangerines. There you go. That's usually only for the wealthy. They're pretty expensive. They're kind of rare, and they're very expensive exports. Notable characters: Tothmet, Pharaoh King, and Grand High Magus of the White Magi is the ruler of Tothconan, and thus holds the most power in R. Like I kind of hinted at earlier, he is said to have 3 sons and 2 daughters, one of the latter having lost her life in childbirth, but a few years ago. The eldest son, Raman Ra, is said to be quite ambitious and highly gifted in magic craft. Amanankara is the pharaoh of Akhmet, a sometimes scheming and magically powerful ruler. Sethras, called the Sea Queen, is the current pharaoh queen of Cuthmes, the first female ruler of an Aryan city. The famous warrior goddess, warrior guardian, Nunotep, is said to still live, training young warriors in a small village in the far southwest of Ar, which would be near the Wizard Wood. I think that's probably going to be it because I'm at 43 minutes. Yeah, well, let's close with, let's see. Yeah, the weather is kind of dry, as you would imagine. God, there's a lot of customs. I wish maybe I will just go into that. I don't want to short. I mean, I don't want to like. If I'm at this point in the video, I might as well just go a couple more minutes longer. Ours overall climate is hot, balmy, and humid along the coast. And coinage and currency: the 3 city-states of Ar mint a silver coin called an onkros, the primary currency of the realm. The bronze coin, which is actually copper, is known as a pitar, while the gold coin is called an aris, or even Ar even produces a coin made from electrum called a kolo, a fairly rare alloy, and at one time even minted a platinum piece called a tathmar, which is worth around 5 gold pieces. Cool. Let's see. They like to export exotic wood, particularly from the wizard wood and certain teak woods, lotus plants, cotton, cheap wine or liquor, gold, Of only fair quality, Aryan gold. There's it's more of a. It's not quite as good as a lot of gold you might find in some of the other parts of the world. So they use a lot more for like decoration. Copper, some gems, crystal prisms, pottery, sponge, pearl, and alchemical goods are primary exports. Primary imports, Aryans typically import apples, bananas, pears, and other exotic foodstuffs such as cattle beef, sweetbreads, and fine wines. They also buy and trade for wooden goods, leathers, gems such as diamonds, rubies, iron, tin, and silver. Let's see. And then they have a lot of cool different little comment. There's like a whole like half of a column. It is illegal of common customs. It is illegal to eat snake flesh in Tothcana and Akban. I think I already mentioned that. In Cuthmes, even the smallest boat must first check in with a harbor master before going out to sea. Most folk, particularly nobles and priests, shave their heads and all body hair as to ward off lice, ticks, and fleas. Women will often don wigs made of camel or human hair, and this comes fairly from Egyptian culture too, or ancient Egyptian. Black lotus is illegal to sell or um, possess in all Aryan settlements. Purple and red lotus is monitored and often highly taxed unless possessed by a priest or white magus. Scorpion venom is illegal in Tothcana and Cuthmes, although in Akhmet it is legal but highly taxed, and da, da, and is often used for medicinal purposes. In other words, it's probably it's made for antidotes like anti-poison serums and that sort of stuff. Let's skip a little bit more down since this is going pretty long. But hopefully, if you guys have made it this far and finding this reasonably enjoyable and/or useful. Killing a lion or seagull is illegal in Cuthmes, punishable by heavy fines or indentured servitude. Killing a scarab is considered bad luck and is even illegal in Akhmet. When Aryan sailors go to sea, it is considered respectful to sacrifice a goat or lamb and throw it overboard, or a pearl or crystal. Aryans typically abhor complete darkness, often having an oil lamp or brazier burning through the night. Though not as much a belief in present day are, it was once thought that one's shadow was one's altar or nether self, growing in morning and evening and lessening in midday. I should have mentioned that earlier. That's a deeper reason for the light dark thing. New cults are illegal in the three city states, and those worshipping Zur are banished from the realm forever, or even put to death in extreme cases. And I skipped. There were a few in the middle that I skipped. That was most of the common customs. I will end with common sayings because these are kind of fun. May the light of Arius shine always upon you. May you find light and enlightenment. May the sun guide you and the sea abide you. Pass not into shadow a Sepha to tread in Zarcon. The light reveals what the darkness conceals. Let the sea swallow your secrets. There you go. All right. So, that was R, and the Aryans are RN people. And next, I guess, next up would be Azarian. I think I'm going to go in alphabetical order. Would be the people of Azaria. So, thanks for hanging in there. Good to do another video. Check it out. Like, subscribe. Hopefully, I'll get some more people watching these things so I can do some more. And I will talk to you guys later.